Okay, folks, so what I want to do is I want to take you back into this place called reclaimhosting.com. And reclaimhosting.com, you should have watched the previous video on some really basic navigation. I'll go into a little bit more detail on what I want you to be able to do with other things, other tools within Reclaim, but I want to get really specific with regard to this database class. So I'm going to get logged back into this, and we'll see if, okay, it actually remembered me. That's not exactly good. Let me move this out of the way. I'm going to just make sure that I'm really logged in properly. Okay, so I'm logged in, and I want to take you directly to cPanel at this point, and I want to talk specifically again about databases. So typically cPanel is, if you're going to be administering a database that produces web pages, it's probably going to be in a MySql database. And if you come down here about halfway down your my list of tools, you'll see databases, and then you'll see PHP My Admin, MySql Databases, MySql Database Wizard, and then Remote MySql. So the three things that we're going to be using are the PHP My Admin, the MySql Databases, and then the MySql Database Wizard. So let's just start with the MySql Database Wizard. So what it's asking me is the database wizard is going to give me the chance to create a database because you don't have any right now. So let's create a database, and I want to call this something that is obviously not what I want to have kept on my machine. So I'm going to give this dastardly name Maddie_her underscore destroy. So it's giving it Maddie_her as a prefix because that's the name of basically my account. And I'm going to call it destroy because I want to get rid of this. I'm going to click on the next step. This is way different than Microsoft Access, by the way. But this is the way that most human beings use databases for websites at this point. So create a database user. When I click in here, it's just giving me a list of a whole bunch of things that I've saved on this computer. But I'm going to call this the destroy user. So I want to make sure I really get rid of this. And I'll give it a password that I can probably remember. And it's a terribly bad password, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. You can also use their password generator. I'm just trying to make this something that I could remember. And again, I want to get rid of it. No, I'm not going to just remember that there. And at this point, when I create this user, and this is something that you haven't done with Access, so this particular user is a little bit like the username when you log into the computer to create your Microsoft Access database, right? You have to log into the computer to get to your stuff to see your Access database. This is a little bit different because it's tied to the database itself. And so if you move it somewhere else, the username goes with it. So if I were to export and send you my database, you would also have my username in there, which is good because it makes it portable. Microsoft Access generally doesn't work that way unless you do some crazy crap with it. Okay, so I want this destroy guy to have a lot of privileges, and so I'm going to give them all the privileges. And if you look through here, alter, create temporary, delete, event, index, lock. You can do a lot of stuff here. Triggers, updates, show views, insert. You don't even know what these things are at this point. But I would recommend that the first user you create, you give all of these privileges, these roles to. And then we'll go to the next step. So this will be like the God user. The user Maddie_her destroy user was added to the database Maddie_her destroy. So I've got the Maddie_her with one R underscore destroy database, and I have the Maddie_her underscore destroy user as the user, obviously. So we could add more databases, we could add more users to the database, we could return to MySQL databases, or we could go home. Let's just go home. I don't really care at this point. Go home. Run home, Jack. Run home, Jack. Okay, so I'm going to go back down to my databases section. I've got PHP My Admin, MySQL Databases, MySQL Database Wizard. Typically, you're not going to be using the MySQL Databases or the MySQL Database Wizard to work with the databases. You're going to be using this thing called PHP My Admin. Very, very common. If you're a web developer, this is probably your best friend. So you would click on that. It's going to redirect me in a moment, but basically it's going to let me see my databases. I have one database with this particular user. We just created it, and it's called Maddie Her. You knew that. You watched me do that. If I click the plus sign, actually that's not exactly true. That's my username. I have multiple databases that I did create in here, my bad. Here's the destroy database. That's the one we want to work with. So if I click on the destroy database and open up the little plus sign over here, you can see that I don't have anything in there. I've got 3 other databases here. If I click on the plus sign on the one below that, you can see it shows tables and views. If I click on the one beneath that, I don't have anything in there. And if I click on the one beneath that, oh, I have some stuff in there. I don't even know what these are. I guess I do know what the Fremont local thing is, but the one we want to work with is the MaddieHer_destroy, because that's the one we created. So there's a couple of things that you can do that you do know about here. You could create a table. You've already created tables in Access, and this is going to be your job. I'm going to give you some very specific instructions in an upcoming video, but your job is going to be to choose one of the Access databases. So the structure of the database and some of the corresponding data, some or all of that, is going to need to go into tables, and you're going to need to recreate the structure. You're going to have to use one of the databases that you built for tutorial 3 or tutorial 4 or review 3 or review 4. Okay? So you can't do the original version of that thing. So if you didn't build it correctly, it might be a little tricky for you to be able to do this, because you won't know. So let's say that we want to call this table the billing table, and we want to give it 5 columns, and we choose Go. This is almost exactly the same as Access. It's going to have slightly different information that it's going to use here. But if I give it a name of, let's call it the billing ID, and the type is going to be a similar or familiar type that you're going to have used within Access. But you can also see there's a lot of different stuff in here. There's more things than Access would actually give you. So tiny integers, bits, booleans, length, values, collation, attributes. And so we're going to do a couple of different things with this. But you get the idea that these are going to be very, very similar that your Access had. So the comments is basically like a description that you could use. The primary key, the unique key, an index, a full text. There's a lot of stuff that's in here that you might not actually know about. But if you click on the structure, or you click on the default, actually I'm not clicking, I'm just hovering on this computer, the types. So this one looks like it's a clickable link to go to type for documentation. So it's going to take me to a different page. And this is the MySQL documentation. So you can begin to learn a lot of stuff about this. That's beyond the scope of this class, but some of you are probably more interested than others in this. So basically, what we want to do is we want to get this information from Access into your MySQL database. So before you get too crazy about doing that, you need to become a little more familiar with just the logistics of where things are, the buttons you need to click. So to create a couple of databases for Fake, so that you know how to create these fields, I think that would probably be job one. And I think a couple more things that I want to show you up here at the top. So here's the Mattyherd destroy database. So I didn't save anything, so all the work we did there, I just ignored it. But there's a few more tabs up here. There's SQL, there's search, there's query, there's export, there's import. So on this import, this is one of those tools that might actually make your life amazingly simple, because you could import just like you could in Access. You may be able to import structure of your database and the data, or the data, maybe both, into this database. So import can give you a lot of very fast ways to move things from one database or parts of one database to the other. So if you remember with this Access work that you've done, there were Excel files that you imported into Access, there were Access files that you imported into Access, and there were text files that you imported into Access. Well, imagine if you were able to take your Access database and dump it into MySQL. I'm not going to give you the instructions for that, but for those of you who were, working smartly, you're probably going to want to be looking for things like that, because you can take the structure from Access and potentially move it directly into MySQL. Microsoft does not like that because they really want you to use Access, so it might be a little more tricky than you might think right off the bat. Where there's a will, there's a way. So if you do a little bit of research, you could probably actually find some of that. So that's, in a nutshell, that's basically what the task is going to be. And I'm going to create a discussion board for you guys to begin to ask questions, and we can begin to kind of work our way through this. There's no right way to do this. There's no wrong way to do this. Ultimately, it needs to be set up in a very solid way, though, so that you know that your Access database wouldn't let you do certain things if you screwed something up. MySQL is the same way. So if you're trying to establish a foreign key, or you're going to establish some sort of check constraint or things like that, it's going to squawk at you if your data is not correct or if your structure is not set up properly. Okay, so you've got a pretty good structure already in your Access world that we need to bring over into the MySQL world. So let's see if you guys can get a little bit more functional with just creating a database and maybe a silly table that we're not going to use for anything. And then I'll give you a little bit more instruction about how to work with your Access databases to get that information over into MySQL. So look for the discussion board. Once you feel like you've been able to get a backup of your entire Reclaim hosting, and you're able to mess with the creating tables and things like that within MySQL, and you're able to get into PHP My Admin and navigate properly, then you'll be ready to actually begin the process of moving that stuff over. Okay, more soon. Thanks.